I thought I knew this story. I saw the movie way back when it came out, and actually I never realized it was adapted from a novel at all. And I'm only bringing this up because if you out there watching this right now have seen the film and are wondering, is there a reason to even read the novel, assuming it's just an expansion of the same story that you saw on film, you are dead wrong, my friend, because this book is something special. It is something incredibly unique. It is a shining example of how fantastic the written word can be and how to take full advantage of the medium of the novel. But before I begin with a review, this book was suggested by Ian Kirkpatrick and voted on by you out there, yes you, so I'm upholding my part of the deal by giving this book a review. And just so you know, the final book I read every month is chosen by you. So if you would like a chance to suggest a book, check out my wrap-up TBR videos at the very beginning of each month. So what is the hook? What is We Need to Talk About Kevin about? Eva Kachadorian, an independent woman with a thriving business and a lust for travel, never wanted to be a mother. But eventually, after much scrutiny and dialogue with her husband, she had Kevin, who would prove to be her own flaws personified, and grow up to murder 7 of his high school classmates 2 days before his 16th birthday. There are so many great things to talk about regarding this book, but let us start with character. So first and foremost, this is probably some of the most authentic characterization I've ever read in a novel ever. And it all begins with Eva Kachadorian. She's an American woman of Armenian descent. She's successful, she's intelligent, she's articulate, she's happily married, and she will insist that she is a loving, caring, thoughtful person. But is she? That's the great thing that Shriver is playing with here. Because the narrative device of this novel is that Eva is writing letters to her husband, Franklin. So this entire book is composed of letters. And in these letters, Eva is looking back upon the events of her life that led up to this terrible tragedy. She's questioning herself. She's questioning her husband. She's questioning everything around her. She's playing detective, trying to figure out where she went wrong. Is it her fault? Is it not her fault? How much was nature and how much was nurture? But we all know that letters are a very personal thing, and Shriver lets Eva's character slip through, her ugly side slip through for us to see. And it's so great because she has this voice that's very apologetic, very thoughtful, but also often holding herself in high regard. But we can see the cracks, we can see the flaws, and it takes a truly great writer to expose that. And she is a great vessel for commentary. There is so much commentary. I'm not going to go through everything in this book, but the text is rich with it. So Shriver presents a very familiar situation. We have these 2 individuals, Eva and her husband Franklin. They're considering having a child. They're treating it like a business transaction. Oh, but if we have a child, we won't be able to travel as much. We won't have as much freedom. They're weighing the pros and cons as if they might be buying a house, for instance. So immediately, this child is born of logic and not love. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't think about having a child very carefully and thoughtfully, but I can appreciate what Shriver is doing here with the character of Eva. She's examining her life from an analytical point of view, wondering if she should bring a child into this world, or does she even want a child? And through these letters, we get a fascinating study of her psychology, of how she rationalizes, of how she reveals herself, her darkest thoughts, to us without knowing. And it's such an illuminating experience to explore the mind of this woman because she's been through a very terrible thing. I mean, her child has killed people, and she goes back through the pages of her life to follow the breadcrumbs to try to solve the case, to try to find out, was it nature or was it nurture? And her husband is by her side, often critical, but also often positive. He's kind of the all-American guy, which she pokes fun at a little bit in describing him in the book. And she has this weird pent-up, I don't want to call it hatred, but somewhat of a disdain for America. Even though she is an American, she clings to her Armenian descent. She always talks about how so many countries are better than the US and constantly has this grass is greener mentality. And plenty of these discussions come up in the book between her husband, and even Kevin. And so even, like I said, she continually reminds me of how great of a person she is. Her narcissism and her prejudice rears its head very clearly in the text. And it's lurking just below the surface, just between the lines, to where it doesn't feel like she's coming to a realization of herself. She's not being self-aware. She never really truly becomes self-aware. And I think that's such a great restraint that Shriver accomplished in this novel. So her husband, like I said, he kind of represents the things she loves, but also the things she hates. He's handsome. Like I said, he's pretty much the all-American guy. And during the pregnancy, she has second thoughts. However, he continually loves the idea of having a child, and she in a way becomes the enemy. And then there's Kevin. She has a terrible childbirth. He's a terrible child. He doesn't speak for years. He plays dumb. He poops in his pants until he's like 5 or 6 years old. And these terrible qualities just escalate as the story progresses. And you might think that this book is entirely about Kevin. It's really not. It's about Eva. And one of the most fascinating things about this book, and I'm not sure I'm right, I'm just hypothesizing, is that Kevin really is a personification of her flaws, of her terrible qualities and bad decisions. So first and foremost, he has her Armenian traits, and he challenges a lot of her statements about people, about places, about philosophies. And so anytime she tries to have the upper hand, the intellectual upper hand, Kevin is always there, extremely smart, I might add, to knock her down a few pegs. Which brings us back to nature versus nurture, because she's, like I said, trying to solve the case of Kevin. But epigenetics is an interesting field of study, because we do know that women who are under massive stress while they're pregnant, it can affect the psychology of the child. But Eva thinks she's the victim, but is she? She treated having a child like a business transaction. She had a stressful pregnancy, a stressful birth. She really didn't want the child whatsoever, which makes me think that Shriver to a degree was playing with these mental and physiological traits to compound and produce someone like Kevin. Because that's something we always question ourselves when we hear about a school shooting and we see the parents and we wonder, how could someone raise someone like this? And so rather than making the focus about Kevin entirely in this book and switching it over to Eva was a brilliant move. Because even though we're always interested in the psychology of someone who could do such a thing, we also want to know who created this monster. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Celia, young Celia, the second child of the family. She is the exact opposite of Kevin. Whereas he has dark hair, she has light hair. Where he is evil, she is good. Where he is smart, well, she's not so smart. And this also is another commentary on the fact that, I don't want to say that everybody does this, but you know that sometimes when you might have a bad kid, you think, well, maybe I'll just have another one. Maybe that'll fix all my problems. And that appears to be exactly what Eva is trying to do with Celia. She is having a child yet again for a purpose, not because of love. But I won't belabor it any longer. The characterization in this book, like I said, some of the most authentic, some of the most fascinating, some of the most deep characterization I've ever read. It's full of commentary about parenthood, about relationships, about how we often can't escape who we are, and so much more. So let us move on to the plot. Well, this is a non-linear story. So like I said, this thing is told in letters. However, we begin in the present. We begin after all of these events have happened. So we're moving through the story in a very non-linear way. We begin at the end. Eva goes to visit Kevin in jail, but then we rush back into the past to experience what life was like when they were young and happy, Eva and Franklin, before they had any children. And then it continues to go back and forth, not in any sort of pattern I could identify, which I think was perfect because it creates this chaotic pattern of someone who is trying to figure out where they went wrong, what happened. So one thing I will briefly say, and it's kind of a double-edged sword because it does lend to the authenticity of the writing, but there's often tangents. Many tangents are happening in this thing. So as we think, especially when we are kind of pouring our souls out to somebody, one thing might lead to another. And that's exactly what happens here. And I'm not going to lie, I'll talk about this more in the writing section, but there were times I was bored, but then also most of the time I was fascinated because Shriver manages to make everything matter. It all leads up to something. And we get to experience all of the grisly details. However, Eva wasn't there when all this went down. She is writing from what she thinks happened. But the one thing I can't stress enough is that this book really feels like you found letters in a box somewhere written by a stranger, and you're just reading them one by one. It's that brilliant. It's that immersive. And speaking of immersion, let's talk about the writing itself, or as I like to call it, the cinematography of the novel. As I've said numerous times, this is told in letters, and it's a fantastic narrative device. And they're all addressed to her husband, Franklin, and that in itself adds to the weight of the whole thing, but I'm not going to spoil it for you. They're no longer together, and you're constantly wondering, what happened to this happy couple? So on one hand, there's two mysteries. There is the mystery of what did Kevin do? How did this all go down? How did he become the person he became? But also what happened to them? And speaking from a craft perspective, one of the greatest things she does in this book is that she manages to capture the mundane nature of life, the things we all talk about with other people, especially in something like a letter or an email or a phone call. But she structures it in such a way that creates an interesting and engaging scene. So often when we're writing scenes, we're trying to create a certain construction to optimize reader engagement, to keep their attention. And I'm still not quite sure how she does it because there are pages and pages and pages of parts where you're like, I shouldn't care about this, but I'm interested somehow. And then she magically weaves it all together in the end to matter. And so even though these are letters, they're very well constructed chapters from a scene level. And that is a very difficult thing to do because I feel like I've read other books written this way, and they err too much on the side of either trying to make it feel like an authentic letter or trying to make it feel like an exciting scene to engage the reader. Shriver manages to do both at the same time. I just remember reading this book often thinking to myself, why am I so interested in this? It's so ordinary, the stuff she's talking about right now. I just want to get to the good stuff, meeting the mystery of Kevin and the terrible things he did and how it affected her. But it works. She makes it totally work here. I don't think I'll ever understand her magic. It would be fun to analyze one of her chapters though, to see if I could suss out the details and why it was so compelling. There's also a great moment of suspense in the novel, which I was kind of surprised, like how do you achieve that in a letter? Well, I'll tell you how Shriver does it. So there's a moment, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but Kevin has discovered doing something bad, of course, but it's related to another person in the book. They're both children at the time, elementary school, if I remember correctly. And right when it's almost going to be revealed what happened, Eva starts telling backstory about the potential victim. And it works so damn well. It didn't feel cheap because I remember reading it on the edge of my seat and skimming going, God damn it, what happened? What happened? I didn't know what happened right now. And it's funny thinking about it because when a book is written in a cinematic way, as most books are, as if you're seeing these images unfold before your eyes like a film, you have more techniques at your disposal to create tension or to create suspense. But in the middle of a letter written by a woman to her husband, you just don't really see that. At least I haven't. And so I was in complete awe most of the time reading this book. Shriver is a master at her craft. But this book must have taken so much research because not only from a psychological standpoint, but there's so much current event material. So she brings up other school shootings to compare to Kevin's. And so this story really feels like it's kind of wedged in the reality that we all live in, which is why I'm going to give We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver a 9.5 out of 10. A damn near perfect book that achieves the pinnacle of characterization with a plot that at times feels scattered and verbose, but that's entirely the point, making us truly feel Eva's plight, both sympathizing with her and hating her, and with writing that feels like you stumbled upon a box of letters written by a real person and can't help but look away from the pain. This is one of the best books I've read in a long time, and I absolutely urge you to pick this book up and read it. It's a gut punch. It's a very haunting book. It's full of amazing commentary and exploration of the psychology of one woman dealing with a terrible tragedy. And I can't say enough good things about this book, so I will leave it here. But let me know, did you read We Need to Talk About Kevin? Do you disagree with me? Did you not find it as engaging as I did? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you would like to check out my own work that I'm sorry to say is not as well written as this, check out the Amazon link down in the description. And thanks for watching and thanks for hanging out with me. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Hey, loyal viewer who watches to the very end. Well, I do this sometimes, generally with the books that I feel need to be read if you haven't read them. So I would love to buy you a copy of this book. All I need you to do is comment down below and be subscribed, of course, and just say, I can't wait to read this book. The first person who comments that will win a copy of this novel. So good luck to those of you who watch to the very end of this video. And if you're a winner, I hope you enjoy the book. Thanks again for the support, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.